When I look back, of course it's gone very quickly. I remember my father being here farming the land before me. My father had been a farmer all his life, and his father before him and his father before him, so it goes back a long way. But they first came to Seymour in 1929. Father became the tenant of Sayers Farm. It was a very, very difficult period for farming in the 20s and early 30s. A lot of farmers went broke, and my father had to work long hours for very little money. My father was a tenant of a family by the name of Schobloch. They were of German origin, and they came to England and bought the land in Seymour in 1912, I think it was. And then, at the beginning of the First World War, they were deported back to Germany because they were classed as aliens. And they didn't come back until 1920. Lots of people thought they'd been long since dead, but they weren't. They came back and they took over the farms again. When they came back from Germany, they had very little money. They'd lost all their possessions in Germany, so they had to sell one farm, but they kept Sayers Farm. The picture in my hand now shows the house that the Schoblochs moved to in about 1930 or 31. The house in the wood, which had recently been thatched by the Schoblochs, caught fire and burnt down. They moved back to the little cottage on the top of the hill which was thatched, and they lived there until they both died. They had one son, Robert. He joined the army. He became a captain, I think it was, a captain in the English army. And he fought in the Second World War for England. But his cousin from Germany, called Peter, was fighting for the Germans. The family were fighting on different sides. Robert Schobloch died in 1953 in London. Peter, his first cousin, he was living in New York. He became the owner of the farm. So I had to buy the farm off Mr. Peter Schobloch in 1970, I think it was. When I first started farming at Sayers Farm, it was a very mixed farm indeed. Breeding pigs, chickens, and I grew wheat, barley, oats, beans. I did try peas once, but not very well, and sugar beet. Oh, and some potatoes. I also got 8 acres of potatoes, which was a very, very labour-intensive business, picking them up by hand. I did buy a combine, a second-hand combine, on my first year. It was a rather tatty old thing, but it worked. It was a combine that only put the corn on into sacks. It wasn't a bulk combine. So everything had to be stored in the barn in sacks. You could hire sacks from corn merchants, but they did charge you a penny a sack per week. If you had the corn in the merchant sacks, it was very difficult to sell that corn to somebody else. But if you had your own sacks, you were independent, and you could sell to whoever you liked. A neighbouring farmer, Mr. Church at Wenham, he unfortunately went broke, so I bought several hundred sacks from him at the sale. Unfortunately, they were all in his name. In one winter, we made up a template, I think the word is, and had some paint, and every sack we put G. Bendall onto. It took us a whole winter, but it was something to do in the warm and the dry. The sacks, we used to weigh them in the barn before they went away. If they were oats, they were 12 stone. If they were barley, they were 16 stone. If they were wheat, they were 18 stone. And if they were beans, they were 19 stone in a sack. And if you were fortunate enough to have any red clover seed, they were 20 stones in a sack. There's not many people can really say they can carry 20 stone on their back and feel comfortable. I know one of my relatives, Peter Knott, a very, very strong man from Polstead. He actually carried a sack of barley, I think it was a mile for wager, and he did it. He was a very strong man. Today, they only need about 1 or 2 people on a farm, but in the olden days, when we were doing it all by hand, you needed the number of people. And this is where neighbours would come and help each other. They'd come and help you, and then you'd go and help them. In the photograph I'm looking at now, on Mr. Ranson's farm at Drakestone. He borrowed my old binder and he cut this field of thatching straw wheat. The varieties of wheat had changed dramatically, from a tall wheat to a shorter, stocky wheat, and the straw was no good for thatching. So this special wheat had to be grown. I think I'm on the load there and putting it onto the thatching machine. He helped me and I helped him over the years. For my 41 years farming here, I made a living out of the farm. And I brought up my family and I managed to save enough money to buy the farm. This small area down here is called Hollow Trees. Hollow Trees is the name of the farm shop and the area round about it, but the farm is still Sayers Farm.